I think it's safe to say we have all seen just like egregious examples of creators, pattern designers having their work stolen, counterfeited, all sorts of things. I personally don't sell at markets, but I've also heard of people setting up all of their handmade plushies right next to a booth of someone reselling crochet items from, some place like Alibaba or Temu or something like that. Recently there was, I don't know if it was a book or like a card thing of granny squares that was counterfeit. Examples are just endless. And I think everybody can agree it's horrible. All it does is hurt the little person who's really putting the time and the effort and the energy and the money into creating these things themselves. I went back and forth quite a bit on whether or not I was going to post this video. I took lots and lots of notes to just make sure everything is how I want to say it. And if you do choose to watch this video, I just ask that you keep an open mind and don't go into it with any type of political mindset, because the information that I want to share in this video is not politically based. This is how it affects us as creators, small business people, makers. It really has nothing to do with the politics side of this. So I'm about to cringe as I say the topic of today's video, but it's about the potential impact that a tariff could have on small businesses and makers like us. Not only do I ask that you go into this with an open mind and don't go into it like preset political views on this, I ask you not to make political comments. In fact, I have my settings so there are a lot of political words and names that are already on the block list because I don't want that type of stuff. I want my channel to be a place where you can enjoy being creative and free and supportive away from all the political stuff. Why I'm kind of like on the fence about making this video, but I think there's important stuff to cover here. And I think it's possible that there's a silver lining in it for people like us. There are so many examples out there, and I think creators, pattern designers, makers, small businesses, now that they have access to, like Instagram Reels and all of this different YouTube, all of this different stuff, they are taking to these platforms to be able to come forward, show what their original work looks like, and try to expose companies that are profiting illegally and unethically off of them. It's been super hard for any of these people, these creators, to really get a lot of recourse against these companies because unfortunately, they're generally not US based. A lot of times they are based in China, and they're not like following or respecting US patent laws when it comes to counterfeiting and things like that. The other thing I've seen is where when, like say an Etsy designer has something stolen, their pictures are being used to sell someone else's counterfeit product, or even like their pattern was been like directly stolen. If you try to go after these companies, they might shut down, they might open up under another name, all these different things. And it's really, really hard for your average small business to go after them. I mean, when you look at how many counterfeit products are on the market as far as like sneakers, like Nike, when you look at like Disney products, designer handbags, and those are all huge companies that take their intellectual property very serious. And if it's hard for them to hunt down and prosecute these companies, it's going to be near impossible for, people on our scale. I know I watched a video one time of a gal who had a knit sweater pattern for sale. She actually ordered it basically off of, I think it was Shein. And with that, what she did was like they had used all of her photos for the photos of the sweater. So it was like legit her wearing her own sweater. So she ordered it and did a whole video comparing. I wish I could remember who it was at this point. If I find it, it, I will link it. But there's no shortage of these stories, so you've probably seen one too. But yeah, they had her pictures from her pattern listing of her wearing the sweater, and then it was there. They had made a cheap knockoff of it and were selling it. So she ordered the knockoff and had them both, hers and the knockoff, compared. Of course, there was a difference in quality. Hers was wool, this was acrylic. The colors were different. Like it wasn't the same. Not only was it just like complete theft of her intellectual property, it was also deceiving for the customer because they were definitely not getting the same product that they were seeing in the photos. And that happens all too often as well. So for designers, the biggest problem is like lost income. When you look at how much time it takes to design and create and market something, and then someone else sweeps in, steals your hard work, and then profits from it, and oftentimes are selling it for much less, like if it's a finished product. How do you compete with that? They're stealing so many things, not just your intellectual property, but also your income. It can be a lot of damage to a brand reputation if a consumer thinks they're ordering from an original maker. If they didn't do their due diligence on where they're ordering from, and then here the product comes and it's really like substandard compared to what you're selling, and yet then that person, writes on your social media, crappy product or whatever, when it had nothing to do with you. It was someone who stole your photos. Now that we've talked about what these unethical companies do, let me explain what a tariff is. Again, I'm going to refer to my notes. I've got my readers on, so I don't mess this up. Tariffs are fees added to goods imported from other countries. They are usually intended to protect domestic industries or balance trade. There have been a lot of these in the news lately, and I avoid the news like the plague. I am not interested in filling up my mind with a bunch of like negative stuff and people arguing with each other. That is not my cup of tea, but it seems like it's almost unavoidable. And again, that's why I thought I would make this video, because I do think that there's a silver lining to this for handmade businesses and for makers. Let's talk about it. The first and foremost way that this can help handmade makers is because when that very cheap knockoff product is made, generally speaking, by unethical labor, someone in another country might be making like $2 a day to make this item. We can all agree crochet and knit is worth far, far more than that. So when these tariffs are attached to products like that, very cheap products, it all of a sudden makes it much more expensive to bring that product in. So that is going to give the original creators of the original products a lot more leeway. If the prices of the knockoff and the original are a lot closer, you're gonna find more people are willing to buy the original. If price is their main concern, if the prices are made to be more even, I should say, a little more balanced, then the original handmade item doesn't have near as much cheapness to compete against. Another way is it can really help some of these major retailers think twice about stocking and importing some of these cheaply made handmade items. I mean, we have seen in a lot of like TJ Maxx type stores or Target, where they have the crochet type stuff, and you just think this is worth so much more than the price on here, if when people make it by hand. And all of a sudden, if a $20 bag is now $60 and much more comparable with the handmade items made here by makers, locally, that doesn't really fit into those big box stores like retail pricing strategy. It's just not competitive. They're not going to want that. So chances are it's not going to be something they carry. And when the big box stores stop carrying it, there's far less demand for these manufacturers and other companies to produce it. So overall, these tariffs could really help as far as making sure that these goods are produced ethically and can help makers really be able to remain competitive with their handmade goods. Now, on the downside, there are things that really makes no difference, like the tariff will make no difference on. So, number one, a tariff has nothing to do with these companies stealing your intellectual property. So unfortunately, they can still do that. It will make no difference on that. And I don't mean they can do it like it's okay. I mean, if they're unethical, they will probably just continue to do it. The other downside is going to be that as a maker, there's a lot of products that we do get internationally, and that can make our products in turn cost more. If the only place, if everywhere I buy a pom-pom for a beanie, if every single pom-pom was, made in China, those pom-poms are going to cost more and my beanies are going to cost more. So I can learn to make a pom-pom myself. Totally could. There's a bunch of videos on that. I've never done it, but I know it's possible. But basically our raw materials could be costing more. So that leaves us, with the choice. Do we want to continue sourcing our materials overseas and potentially be paying those tariffs ourselves and passing that on to our customers? Or do we maybe upgrade what our supplies are and buy them from domestic manufacturers, local artisans, learn to do it ourselves, things like that. During this transition, and whether or not these tariffs go into effect, I don't know. While I'm filming this, I believe there's been a hold on some, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm avoiding the news. But there's always things you can do, not just right now, but there's always things you can do to help the original designers. So the first one is support local indie designers. I like once in a while to splurge on some hand spun or hand dyed yarn made by someone I know. Things like that can make a difference. Devoting 1 month even, or 2 months, or what if you even devoted 6 months of your yarn budget to really getting something that is handmade, hand dyed, etc. That would be a wonderful way to support indie designers. If you see stolen IP, intellectual property, report it. Etsy has been flooded with this type of stuff. So from what I have heard, people have not been that successful as far as getting recourse against them, but it never hurts. Just report it if you see it. It's like grains of sand filling up an hourglass, right? If we look at it that way. If you are a designer, I would encourage you to educate your customers on how to tell the difference between your original handmade item and a knockoff. Do what you can to really differentiate your product from a fake one and let people know. Let them know before they purchase. Get that out there. Don't wait until something could unfortunately get stolen and then panic and try to let people know. Like, just go into it with the mindset from the get-go that you worked hard on this and it is important that you retain that intellectual property. So I'm going to keep this pretty short today. I just want you to know that not everything is all bad. There are good things in all things, and we need to really change our mentality to see the good in things. And while talking about these things and experiencing these things can be super scary, there could be some definite benefits for the handmade community if this continues to go through. So please, let's keep any of the comments really about supporting makers and creators and designers and how we can support them. If you have a favorite maker or designer or anything like that, I would love for you to leave them in the comments and give them a little bit of a show of support. Like if you have a favorite pattern designer, anything like that, shout them out down in the comments. And it doesn't necessarily have to be yarn related either. It could be, sewing or stained glass or like literally anything. Shout them out down in the comments and let's really help support them. I think that's the best thing we can do as we are waiting to see what all happens in the future. Thank you so much for talking yarn with me. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.